Have you ever wanted to drive to the grocery store, but the fastest route to the store is blocked off by an inconvenient roadblock? Metroid Prime 3 speedrunners have run into this problem since the dawn of time, where they cannot take the optimal path to the grocery store because of an inconveniently placed Phazon roadblock, which happens to require the hyper grapple. So instead of this nice shortcut, they have to take a long and slow detour instead. A major part that drives speedrunning is the sequence breaks and skips found in the game. These can be accidental finds or community efforts. For many games, a further iteration of a skip can be described as the Holy Grail skip. These skips are so major that large sections of a game would have the potential to be skipped, along with massive time saves across the board. The most well-known example of this is in The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. For years, the Wind Waker community attempted to skip the barrier that blocked access to Ganon's tower, which normally requires collecting all 8 Triforce pieces from across the Great Sea. Without going into too much detail, since this is a video on Prime 3 and not the Wind Waker, the community of the Wind Waker was able to skip the barrier in both the HD and GameCube versions of the game, each with their respective tricks. Links to those videos will be in the description. Unlike the Wind Waker, Metroid Prime 3 does not have an official barrier skip. However, it does have its own holy grails and potential barriers that can be skipped. One of these more infamous holy grails is a trick known as Early Elysia. Found in 2011 by former speedrunner Aruki, a trick was discovered that allowed access to Elysia without defeating the Brio Seed. This is really significant in that it skips ice missiles, main ship missiles, and hyperball. This trick is very complicated and difficult to do because it requires timing a bomb space jump to land on the ship, and then from there doing a spring space jump off the ship to land on a crate that a robot is carrying that is conveniently passing by every 10 or so seconds. Then from there, jumping on top of the robot, jumping around this invisible wall that if you touch, you lose your space jump, wiggling to the standable terrain behind the wall, jumping from there into the aether, and you're out of bounds. There are other tricks that you have to do that are associated with it, but those are much easier. But this is the basis to it. But this is one of the biggest holy grails for this game to this date. I will link the forum thread on Metroid 2002 in the description below if you want to see more about it. One barrier that has been in the community's eye for quite some time is Grapple Skip. For those unfamiliar, Hypergrapple is the final major item received in the game that is given to Samus after defeating Omega Ridley in Pirate Homeworld's Leviathan Seed. While this item sounds important, it only allows Samus to target and then destroy Phazon blobs. There are precisely 2 blobs in the game. One of them is on Pirate Homeworld, and the other is on Phase, the final area of the game. So, why are these blobs so important? Well, in order to beat the game, you must retrieve the pirate code from the GFS Valhalla, then return to Pirate Homeworld with the newly acquired Hypergrapple, so the blob that blocks access to Leviathan can be removed, so you have access to Phase. But to even reach this point, we have to complete a bunch of steps, so I'll briefly go over the details. In the optimal 80% routes that do a trick known as Early Elysia, only a single ship missile is required to beat the game, which is used to gain access to the Leviathan Seed on Pirate Homeworld. To reach that point, you have to disable the planetary defense, do an escort mission with Federation troopers, and then fight the pirate commander at the end to gain access to the landing site. From there, the one ship missile is used to unlock the seed to reach Omega Ridley, which guards the Hypergrapple. Luckily, there is a skip to reach the seed quicker by skipping most of that sequence, called Demolition Skip. Depending on the category, this skip saves around 3 to 4 minutes. Okay, so now we understand how to access the blob and what it does, so why not just skip it? There are many ways to get out of bounds in this part of Pirate Homeworld anyway, so this should be pretty easy then. We can simply go out of bounds in defense access, wall crawl past the blob and command station, go back in bounds and take the train to deliver the pirate code, then head to Phase. Right? Well, not exactly. The blob is actually more complex than it appears, as it consists of 2 parts. The first part is the obvious one, the blob itself. It is clearly visible and is blocking the door behind it. However, that is not the worst of it. The second part is the more annoying part that is hard to see because, well, it's invisible. Unfortunately, if you get behind the blob, you cannot return because there is an invisible wall inside the blob that does not go away until the blob is destroyed. So even if you manage to clip on top of the blob through a reposition from the bottom, you would still be stuck behind the invisible wall. Now, skipping the first blob may seem like a minor skip. However, it brings with it a major reroute for any percent and new item skips for low percent. If we could return from using the pirate code without any issues, the run would be quite different. Instead of having to go through the whole demolition sequence or just skipping it without a bounds, the fight with Omega Ridley can also be skipped, saving upwards of 10 minutes. This also means that ship missiles would no longer be required to beat the game, thus lowering the current low percent from 15% to 13%. But what about the other blob? Wouldn't that also need hypergrapple? I mean, it's in the way, right? Well, yes, but luckily for us, it is possible to skip that one by simply going out of bounds in the landing site with Screw Attack and wall crawling around it. Unfortunately, even though we can skip this blob, the first remains unskippable. For now, this remains a theory. Thanks for joining me on this video today. I hope you learned something interesting. If you like what you saw, please leave a like and consider subscribing. You can catch me live on Twitch at twitch.tv/Dyceron. I stream speedruns and randos. Hope to see you next time on my next informational video, which has not been decided yet, but I plan to do more of these in the future. Maybe one day we'll have a skip for hypergrapple. But for now, we gotta fight that dragon. Have a good one.